What is up, guys? This is the first video of a very small mini series of about 3 videos in which we will be scraping Bing.com. Now this is going to be very similar to our Google.com scraper. If you have not seen that video series, you can go and check it out. But in this case, it's similar, but it's not the same, in the sense the approach will change slightly, and also the code that we'll write will change quite a bit. So you'll get to learn some new things in this Bing.com scraper series. So this is the first video of the series. Here we'll discuss about the approach that we'll follow, and then in the second and third videos we'll actually write down the code to execute the Bing.com scraper, right? So now let me take you through what we're going to do here. We're going to basically use GoQuery package, which helps us to work with IDs and tags on an HTML page, right? So we'll be able to access those elements. And then we'll create a list of Bing domains like bing.com, bing.in, where we can go and scrape or make requests to. We'll define the struct of the type of search result that we're expecting. So struct is almost very similar to an object in JavaScript. If you don't know what Golang, if you've not read or if you've not studied Golang till now, but if you have an idea about Golang, you obviously know what structs are, right? So I don't have to really explain to you. And if you don't know JavaScript or Golang at all and you're new to programming, then don't worry. When we start writing the code, you'll understand what a struct is. Right, then we'll define an array of our user agents. Now, why we do this is because Bing.com, right, is expecting a human agent to come and make a request to it, right? And how it determines if it's a human agent is because it looks like a browser, in the sense a Google Chrome makes a request to it, or Mozilla Firefox makes request to it, or the Safari makes request to it, right? It's not expecting a Golang program to come and make request to Bing.com, right? It won't understand that request. So we have to create a list of user agents. So we'll write a list of, like, let's say all the type of browsers that are there, like for example Mozilla Firefox and Google Chrome and all those. And when our Golang program sends a request, it'll act as if it's a browser making a request to Bing.com, right? So I hope that's you understand the concept a little bit. Even if you don't, when we'll start writing the code, you will understand these two parts much better. So now let's start thinking about how we're going to approach the program. So before you write the program, it's better to understand the flow of how the program will go, so that you can understand and define the functions accordingly when you start writing the code. And I wanted to draw this diagram because I wanted you to not have a problem when I start writing the code. You'll understand everything really well, or much better if you've seen the diagram, right? So we'll have a func main, which is the most important function in a Golang program, and before this we'll obviously have our import file and our import statement and our package main. So package main and import, those two things you obviously have to do if you're writing a Golang program. And then you have your Bing scrape function, and this function will build our URL. In the sense, it can be the same function, or maybe I'll use Bing scrape function to call another function which will build my URL. Now, URL building is basically, like, let's say in the func main, we'll define the query that we want to search for on Bing.com. So for example, I want to search for web programmers in the US, right? So that's my search query. Now, to be able to execute that search query on Bing.com, I need to create it into a URL. So very similar to how for Google, you have to create a search query or search URL. Very similar to that, you have to create a search URL in Golang, right? So we'll build a search URL, and then we'll select any random user agent from the user agents that we have defined out here, right? So we'll send randomized requests, and then we'll have another function called scrape client request. So in the sense, now we have the build, we have the URL, we have the random user agent, and then we'll have our search query, and then now we'll send a request to the client. We'll send a request to Bing domains, right? And then we'll get some response, and now we'll start scraping it first, and then we'll parse that result, whatever you get, and then we'll parse the result and we'll print it to the screen, basically. So that's the entire flow, right? So I'll just go through it again. We'll have our func main, we'll have a Bing scrape function, we'll have a build URL function, we'll have a select random user agent function, we'll even have we'll have a make request to the Bing domain function somewhere here, and then we'll have a scrape client request, in the sense whatever response that we get, we'll scrape it, we'll parse it, and then we'll print it to the screen, right? So we may change the name of these functions, we may introduce more functions, but this is like the flow that I'm probably going to follow. Just put it on paper so that I can plan better. So I hope you have kind of understood this, and then now when we'll write the code, you won't be very confused.
In this video, we'll actually start writing the code. So in the first video, we had just seen the diagram on how we're going to approach this whole program, and in this video, we'll start creating the project. So I'm in my folder where I usually keep my Go code. So I'm going to create a directory called Bing scraper, and I'll cd into it. And here what we'll do is we'll say go mod init github.com/akhil/bing scraper. You'll replace this with your own name and replace this with the name of the project that you want to keep for this. And we're using a GitHub link because eventually we want to push this code on GitHub. And then if there were multiple files in this project, then it would be easier for us to set relative or absolute paths. So now this go mod init creates basically a mod file for us. So let me show it to you actually. So here you can see a mod file, right? Go mod file. And this is very similar to npm init. So if you're from a JavaScript background, I'm sure it makes sense to you. And this file, go mod file, is almost like your package.json file, where you have the list of all the projects, all the packages that you're going to be using in your project. All right. Now there are a couple of packages that we need in this project, right? And most of them are provided by Golang natively, but there is one where you have to actually get it from an external source. So we'll say go get github.com/puerquito bio/go query. So go query is a package that helps you to parse results that you get from the internet, all right? When I'll show it to you, it'll make a lot more sense. As of now, don't worry about this. So it's downloading this package for us. And it usually takes a while because this is a bigger package than usual. And now you'll see you have a go.sum file as well. So almost like this is almost like your package log.json. All right. So it's a very, very similar package management system like JavaScript. So I'm sure anybody who's from a JavaScript background, they won't be confused at all what's happening out here. Now I'll use my code editor, VS Code. You could be using anything else. And here we'll create our main.go file. Now if you've seen the extracting results from Google video, then this is quite similar. So we're basically going to be extracting results from Bing. Okay. And so obviously we'll have in any Golang program, you have your main.go file, you have your package main, and then you have your import statement where you import the packages that you'll need. And so I know that I'll need the FMT package. I know that I'll need the net/httpt package. I know I'll need strings to work with strings. You need this to make requests. So we'll actually build a Bing URL and then we'll make requests to it to get the result, and then we'll pass the result using the go query package that I just showed you. All right. And you have the time package, you have the math/random package, and you have the net/URL package, and then you have the github.com/puerquito bio/go query. So if you don't know anything about these packages, not a problem. You can read Golang documentation, but this is basically to print out stuff, right? This is to work with strings. This is to help you get random numbers, right? So it's all, and this, like I said, is to make requests, HTTP requests, right? So these are all. There's no rocket science being used here. These are very standard packages that we'll need, but this is the one that's the external package that will help you. So here by mistake I have kept U capital. I have to make it smaller. So, and here by mistake I have kept I as capital, so it should be small. And this is your package that you just installed. All right. Now here we'll be doing a couple of things, right? The first thing that we need is a list of Bing domains. And there'll be a map which will have a string on the left side and a string on the right side, right? So this is what this indicates. So this means that there's a string on the left side, so com, and then there's a string on the right side, right? Like this. So this Bing domains is basically the list of all the domains that Bing has. So for example, .com, .uk, .us, right? So we'll keep a list of all of those. You don't have to worry about that. I'm not going to type all of that out, right? I will leave this code on GitHub and you can just copy and paste from there. So because there are more than 20-30 Bing domains that exist, right? So you don't have to worry about this. So right now I'll just keep com here, but I'm just telling you that this will be a long list of all the Bing domains that exist out there. And I'm sure you've worked with maps, but if you in case you haven't, these are almost like key value pairs, like objects in JavaScript objects. And this has a very JSON-ish writing, what do you call it? The way of writing is very JSON-ish in the sense that you have the strings with double inverted commas on the left, and similarly on the right as well. And the next thing that we have here is going to be the search result. So that's going to be a struct. So we'll say type search result, and it'll be a struct because we want the results to be structured, right? So there will be the result rank, and there will be result URL, and there will be a result title. Sorry, on the next line, result title will be of type string, and result description again of type string. Now the result that we'll get from the Bing search results, right, there will be so many different data points there, but we need only these 4 data points. That's why we'll keep a struct that helps us to keep the structure, maintain the structure of the search result that we want to keep. And if you don't have any experience with structs, not a problem. It's just a data type that you can create on your own, and it in our case it has these 4 different values, one of which is a string, and the other 3 is one of which is an int, and the other 3 are strings, right? So then we'll have a list of user agents. So I'll say user agents will be a slice of type string. Slices are like arrays, right? In case you don't know what slices are, they're like arrays. And in this array, we'll have a list of strings, basically. And these strings represent different type of browsers. So it could be a Chrome browser, or Safari browser, and your Mozilla browser, and along with the operating system. So you create like a string, a long string. Let me show you an example, actually. So I'll copy and paste it from somewhere, and I'll put it here. So if you look at this, this is a combination of a couple of things, right? So your browser and your operating system, so all of those things, right? And this basically, when we have to make a request to Bing, you need to have a user agent. Otherwise it won't understand where the request is coming from, and it won't return data. It will think that it's getting hacked. But you need to have a couple of user agents here, and you have to randomize user agents. So you can't use the same user agent to make requests again and again. So if you're making multiple requests, we'll have to use a couple of not a couple of, but like let's say 6 to 7 at least user agents, right? So here I've kept only one user agent, but I'll put 6 to 7, and this is just for representation right now, so that you understand what's happening. And you can pick up the rest of the user agents from my code in GitHub. I'll just copy and paste it here when we're building the other things as well. Similarly here also, I'll copy and paste all the other Bing domains, but you can just pick them up from my GitHub code. So like I said, we'll have user agents, and then we'll have a function that will help us get a random user agent every single time. Like I said, you can't have the same user agent making requests, otherwise you might just get flagged by Bing or by Google. So in the Google video also we had this function, the same function, and so we'll write something here in this function. Basically it'll be some code to help us get a random value from any of these user agents, right? Then you'll have a function here which will be used to build a Bing URL. So you can build Bing URLs. By building Bing URL, you mean that you'll have your link of Bing, like let's say, let me give you an example. So it'll be like https bing.com, and then you'll have your, it'll look something like this, right? It'll be https:/bing.com/search, and then you'll have your query. So we'll say q is equal to something something, and then you'll have your count, as in how many. So you'll have a query like, Akhil Sharma is the query, for example, and then you'll have count, as in how many result values do you want from Bing. So these kind of URLs we'll have to build. But why we need this function is because we want to input strings, right? We want to pass strings to this for the query, and then we want that to be passed here to this URL, and for this URL to be built in real time, right, based on a variable. And similarly with count as well. And not only that, but we also need to use these Bing domains like com and .in, all of those to be set with the query. So maybe you want to search bing.uk or bing.us, right, or bing.in, and not bing.com. So you can select all of those criteria here. You can select the count that you want, you can select the query that you want. So we'll pass the query and count and all of those things here to this build Bing URL function, and then we'll be able to create this kind of a URL. And then this URL is the one that we'll use to scrape or to make a request to. So talking about making requests, so obviously this will take some parameters and it'll return something. So we'll write this function later on. We'll deal with this later on. And then you have your Bing result parser. But before Bing result parser, you will have your scrape client request. So once you've built your URL, you will have scrape client request, where you will make a request to that link that I just showed you, and then you will get something in return. So this will be function as well. It'll take some parameters, we'll define those, and it'll return some values, we'll define those as well. So this will make a request, and then we'll have another function to scrape Bing. So we'll say Bing scrape. Now Bing scrape is the function that basically talks to your func main. So your func main will basically call your Bing scrape function, and Bing scrape function will be your major function, which helps you to assemble all of the results from all the other functions. So for example, Bing scrape is the one responsible for calling your build Bing URLs and calling your scrape client request and calling your result parser as well. So now we'll have a function called as result parser. So we'll say func Bing result parser, and in this function all you're doing is basically all the results that you get back from scraping the client request, you send it to Bing result parser, and then that will be unstructured data, like a lot of different data points, but we want only these 4 different data points from that data. So we'll take this unstructured data in this Bing result parser, and we'll parse all those results and create these structs for search results that the way we want them to be, and then we'll send them back to the func main. Actually, it'll come back to obviously Bing scrape, because this is like the main function that is talking to all of these different functions, and then from Bing scrape we'll come back to func main, and in func main mostly we'll print it out, or maybe we'll print it out in Bing scrape. Let's see, which is the best place to print out the result. So that is the whole outline of the entire software. We have of the entire project, and we have all these different functions, and then we might have a couple of different functions as well. So those we have to basically think about if you have anything missing. And I think I would keep this video till here, and then I'll try to continue this in the next video, so that it doesn't become too much information for you to take in. But I hope you have the outline now. You have an idea of what we're doing. So if you compare this with the diagram from the first video, everything will make sense. So we have a main function. The control for main function goes to Bing scrape. Bing scrape is the major function which basically talks to all of our other functions, which basically build Bing URLs using your user agents and using your Bing domains. And then you make a request to that link using scrape client request, and then you scrape Bing, and then you get that data into Bing result parser. You parse the result based on the struct that you have created, and you send all that result back to Bing scrape, and all that result back to func main, and you print it out from func main or Bing scrape. That you have to decide yet. And there could be a couple of different functions left again. So that's the overview, and then in the next video we'll just start writing all of these functions. In the first video we had drawn our structure on how the program is going to be. In the second video we start creating all these outlines for all these functions, and in this third video we'll start writing a couple of functions. So first let's actually start with func main. So in func main, like I said, the func main only talks to this function called as the Bing scrape that we have to define out here. So I'll take it from here and I'll actually put it here. And in Bing script, we have to pass a couple of things, right? So we have to pass the query, and we have to pass the Bing domain that I'll use. So for example, I'll be using com. Let's give an example. And the query, for query, I'll say Akhil Sharma. And then I'll have to pass a couple of more things, right? So let's get into that later on. And here we can either get a result or we can get an error from this function. So we'll engineer this function in this way, in a way, Bing script, that it'll either give us a result or an error. Now if error is nil, that means if there's no error, then we'll take the response, we'll range over the response, and we're just going to print out the response. And this is why we required the fmt package. So as we go using all these packages, I'll show you. So fmt package has been used here to print out the result. Okay, and then if you say else, that means, so the if statement gets executed if there is no error, and else gets executed if there is an error. So here we just have to print out the error. Now many people use log for error, printing out the errors, but we're just simply going to print out the errors, right, in this case. So this was your func main, and I think this is it. I mean, we don't need func main for anything else. Now let's get started with our Bing script function, which is going to be quite a big function. And here we'll take some parameters. In the parameters, obviously we have our search term, which is Akhil Sharma, and then we have our country, which is basically our Bing domain, which is com in this case. And then you'll have a couple of more things, right, which like I said, we'll talk about them. And here what it returns is it returns search result based on the struct of the search result. So it'll send us a collection of these different structs, and that's what it'll basically send us a slice of search result, right? So slice is basically a collection, right, and a collection of all these different structs. It'll send us back to this function func main, and that's what we're basically going to be printing out here. The other thing it returns is an error, and we already have error handling built in out here. Okay, so here we'll say results equal to search result, and for now it's empty. So results is going to be that variable, this new variable that we're going to actually return from here. And so like basically at the end we'll say return search results, return results, and then it's of type slice and of struct type search result, and it's currently empty. And then you'll call a function called build Bing URLs. We already have the outline of this function, so all it does is it helps us to build a URL. So it's going to take the search term, it's going to take the country, and then what we also need is the pages and the count. So to be able to build a proper URL, not only do we need the search term and the country, but we also need how many pages do you need, right? How many pages of results do you want to scrape, and what's the count of the values on each page do you need? All right, so here we'll pass 2 as the pages, number of pages that we need, and 30 as the count. 30 I think is sufficient count for us. So here in our Bing script function we have to accept these values. So we'll say comma pages and comma count. All right, and that means in our build Bing URLs function we can pass our country, pages, and count. Now whatever value we get back from this build Bing URLs, oh sorry, the I is capital here, it should be small I, so this is what the function is, and whatever value that you get from this function, you'll take it into this variable called build pages, Bing pages, and then otherwise this function will return an error. So that's how we'll engineer this function. It'll return either the pages or return an error. Quite straightforward. And if there is an error, that means error not equal to nil, we'll return nil for the search result. So that means no search result is returned, and we'll return the error that was encountered here. So we'll say error. So if error is there, then you return no search result and you return an error. All right, I hope everything is clear till now. And if there is no error, right, then what do you want to do? We want to basically range over our Bing pages. So we'll say range over your Bing pages. But to range, you need for loop. So we'll say for comma page, and we'll range over these Bing pages, and we'll say rank is equal to length of results, and then we'll have a function called scrape client request. So that we have already defined here, scrape client request. Now we've received all the pages after building all these Bing URLs, and all we have to do is scrape them. Scraping requires us to create basically make requests, make HTTP requests. So here we have to also pass proxy string, but for now let's leave it. I'll talk about it later. And if error is not equal to nil, now the scrape client request, right, this will return two different things to us. It will return a response, or it will send us an error. So that's how we'll create this function, to return either a response or an error. And if the error is not equal to nil, so let me take it closer, error is not equal to nil, then you return nil for the search results and the error, right? Very similar to this. So with Golang, the best practice is that every time you call a function, you handle the error out there itself, which is a good practice, right? With JavaScript, you sometimes ignore those, or you create try and catch blocks, which can be effective. But I personally, and obviously the whole Golang community finds this to be more effective to catch errors. So then you have your Bing result parser function. In your Bing result parser, you will pass the result that you receive from scraping, and you'll send your rank as well. Okay. Now Bing result parser is the function that we've already talked about. It's basically going to help us take unstructured data, which is going to come to us from this function's scrape client request, and it's going to give us a structured data based on our search result struct. Okay. So we'll take a variable called data, and we'll say data is equal to Bing search result parser. So whatever value comes back from it, you will either get an data or you'll get an error out here. And what we'll do is we'll again handle the error. So we'll say if error not equal to nil, we'll return nil for the search results, and error, the value of error. And then we're just simply going to range over our data, and then we're going to append that to our results, and we're going to create this slice of result, and then we're just going to send it off back. So quite simple. So we'll say for comma result range over data. Like I said, we'll range over data that we receive from here, from our Bing result parser, and we're going to take this into our results variable, which is a slice of type search results, and we're going to append it. So we'll say results comma results. So append it here. Now sometimes you may want to give a little bit of delay, right, between requests. So here you can use something called as a backoff. So backoff is something that we'll have to now pass to this function, right? This is completely optional, right? But this is a best practice. If you're scraping something or if you're making requests to something, you ideally want to use backoff. And in many cases, you want to randomize the time duration between which you make these requests. In this case, we're not randomizing it, but we are still adding some type of delay. Now this backoff needs to come right from your func main. So here we'll say comma 30, which is our backoff duration, and we need to pass that to our Bing scrape function. So after our count, we'll say comma backoff int, and that's how basically you get the backoff out here. So our function is taking shape pretty well, and we have pretty much, created the basic structure for our Bing scrape function. And Bing scrape function is basically, like I said, the most important function in this program, because this is the one that talks to func main and talks to all the other functions that we're going to use. So for example, scrape client request, build Bing URLs. So this is like the center of everything. It's the glue that binds all these functions together and creates those results and sends back to func main, which simply prints out those results. And if you want to, change any of these values, it's highly encouraged, as in change all these values and check how the program works. And that'll be also very interesting for you, because you can basically scrape any country's Bing, and you can also put any search result, search term. You can put any number of pages or search results, number of search results that you want. You can also change the delay here. In the first video, we had looked at a diagram on how we'll be approaching this project. Second video, we started outlining these functions. The third video, which was the previous video, we started working on this Bing scrape function. And in this fourth video, we'll start working on the build URLs function. So let's get started. Now the build Bing URL function, it's going to take all these 4 different things. So let's start writing those down. So these 4 parameters, which will be the search term and the country will be string. Then we'll take pages and we'll take count, which will be int again. And it returns 2 things, right? It returns either a string, which are basically the list of Bing pages, like a slice of strings, I mean, or it returns an error. So we'll have to define that as well. So we'll say a slice of strings, and it returns an error. So let's create a variable called toScrape, which will be a slice of string and empty. Sorry, slice of strings, and for now it will be empty. And this toScrape is what we're going to basically return from this function, which will be of type slice string, right? The toScrape is that variable. Now, whatever search term we receive from our main function, then that goes to Bing scrape function and comes here. Whatever search term that we receive, we're going to have to replace all the spaces in that function, in that search term, with plus. So if you've ever seen how search queries work with, let's say, Google search query or Bing search query, that spaces, or if they're 2 different words, right, they need to have a plus in between them. So if you try searching something on Google, you'll see all these. So if you say, what is the name of the best football team, for example, so between all of these different words, there will be plus signs there. So that basically is a way for us to tell Google that this is the entire search query and it has all these pluses in between. So that's what we have to do here. So we'll say search term, and we'll have to use our strings package here. So we'll say strings.trim, and we'll give it the search term and the space, and then we'll say search term is equal to strings dot replace all these spaces with the plus sign And here we'll say now this is completely optional, right? In the sense you can send this here or not, or maybe the country code that you'll send here is not there in Bing domains. So we'll have to search for the country code that we receive here in our Bing domains, and if we find that, then we'll be able to create the query. Otherwise, we'll say that this country that you've sent us here to this function is not supported because it's not part of our Bing domains map. So I hope that makes sense. And so what we'll do here is we'll say Bing domains, and inside we'll say country. So the country that you'll pass here, like com or UK or US, so we'll try to search that in our Bing domains, all right, in our map. And so let's put an if statement here. So we'll say if country code comma found. If the country code is found, then we'll run a for loop. So we'll say I equal to 0 comma I less than pages, the pages that you send here, how many pages that you want to extract from Bing, and you'll say I plus plus. Sorry, there's a semicolon out here, so we'll say I plus plus. And for the duration of that for loop, we'll have to do something, right? We'll have to create those scrape URLs, and then we'll create those scrape URLs, and then we'll append that to this toScrape slice, and that's the slice that we'll return. But outside of this if statement, we want to write something. So we want to say, if you find that country code here, then obviously you go ahead and create your build URL, your Bing URL. Otherwise, you will send out an error saying country code, which is %s. So this %s helps us to format this entire string here. Right, so you can take the country variable and you can put that here with the help of %s is currently not supported. So whatever country is there in our like com or UK or whatever we pass here, if it's not there as part of our Bing domains, it's going to say that this country is not supported. And you're just going to return nil for the Bing URL strings, and you'll return an error. And at the end of this program, all you have to return is toScrape, okay, which is this variable that we'll soon be working on, and we'll return nil for the error, right? And that reminds me that from our bring scrape function, we didn't return anything, right? So after our time sleep, we'll have to return the results, comma, nil for the error. So these results that are returned, they're captured here, or if there's an error, so you return nil for the result, but error for the error. And accordingly, we'll handle the error and print out the results. So far, so good. So let's go back to our build Bing URL function. And here, by mistake, there's a capital O. It should be a small o. And here, what we want to do is we want to create a scrape URL, right? So we'll say scrape URL is equal to fmt.sprintf, and we'll write the whole link here, right? So the link is bing.com/search $q is equal to %s, %s, and then we'll say and first is equal to %d ampersand count is equal to %d and %s. So sprintf helps us to format out this string completely. And now there are all these different things, right? So there's this query term, then you have your first, then you have the count, and then this %s at the end is your country code. All right, like .com or .uk or whatever like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to write down all the variables here. So for this %s, we have search term, and search term already has all those pluses between wherever there was space. So here we have something called as first. We have our count, the number of search results that you want. First is basically your pages, right? How many pages do you want? And after your count, you have your country code. All right. Now for first, what we have to do is we have to say first parameter, and we'll say I comma count. So first basically will be the pages, the number of pages that we want, right? So for each page we have a separate string here. So we need these this first variable to keep changing for each of these links. And how do we do that? We use this function called first parameter to create it for us, to get this first value for us. So let me show you what this first parameter function looks like. So we'll come here and we'll say func first parameter. It takes a number, takes count, which is of type int. So number in this case is I. So in the beginning I will be 0, then I will be 1, 2, 3, and it'll go till the place time where in the number of pages that you have specified, right? So it could be 9 or 10 or whatever the number of pages you have specified. So I will keep changing. So this first parameter function is called every single time. And like I said, this link is created fresh or anew for every single page that you want to scrape. All right, so that's what this first is here for. And in this function, you just return an int, which will be the value of first here. So like page 1, page 2, page 3, right? And every single time this link is getting created with all of these different variables as well. And that's what we're going to be, the scrape URL, basically we're going to keep, actually let me do that so everything will make more sense to you. So basically we're going to keep appending our scrape URL into our toScrape slice. So it's toScrape, and this again will become a part of toScrape. And this toScrape is basically what we're returning, right? So I'm sure everything now makes a lot more sense. So you create scrape URLs again for every single page. Let's say if you want 20 pages, so you'll have 20 of these links, and all of these 20 different links with all these search term and first, and with the page number, which is first, and then the count number of search terms that you the results that you want on each page, and the .com or .uk that you want. So all of these links are getting created in scrape URL, gets appended to the slice called toScrape, and then that's the slice that you return. And this first you get with the help of this first parameter function. I'm trying to explain every single line. I'm trying to go as slow as possible because I've received some comments from you guys that I don't explain every single line. So I'm trying to do that. But if you still don't understand anything, do drop in a comment and I can sort it out for you. So you don't have to worry. I mean, don't panic because I'm always there. I can always help you out in the comments. All right. So if number is equal to 0. Now the first thing that I will be, the first value of I will obviously be 0 because this for loop starts from 0, goes up to the number of pages that you have passed here, right? So it starts with 0. So if this I is 0, then you're going to say number, you're going to return number plus 1. That's because Bing doesn't understand 0. It understands that, okay, you want page 1, you want page 2, like that. It doesn't understand 0, right? So that's why if it's 0, then you have to pass number plus 1. Otherwise, you just return number into count plus 1. Make sense? So very simple, and you have built your build URL Bing URLs function very easily, and I'm sure everything makes sense to you in build Bing URL function, and in Bing script function everything makes sense. So we had reached a place where we had written our Bing script function, our func main, our build Bing URLs function, and now what we'll do is we'll start working with our scrape client request function. All right, so it'll take a couple of things as parameters, and it'll return a couple of things from this function. So what this function basically does is it takes, as you can see in your Bing script, so you get all those build, you call your build Bing URLs function here, you get all those Bing pages, and for your Bing pages you call this scrape client request functions one by one with all those URLs. So what it's going to take is a search URL, which will be a string, and then it's going to return, it's going to take one more thing, I'll talk about that in a minute, and then it's going to return http dot response and error. So the purpose of this function is to make a HTTP response to the search URL, right? So this, when we range over the Bing pages, we get those search URLs that we had built using our build Bing URLs, right? All these search URLs. So to these URLs we have to make requests now, and that is the purpose of our scrape client request function. One by one we make requests to those links that we have created. And as you know, when you make a HTTP request, you get a pointer to the response, right? HTTP response. So that's what we're going to return from here, and we're also going to return an error. Now to make this request, right, there's some people, if you are if you value security, and if you value privacy and all those things, and if you plan on using this program a lot more, then it's quite possible that you might be using a proxy string or a proxy, right, to make this request. So what we'll do is we'll pass proxy string here. It'll be an interface, and that means your Bing script function should have received the proxy string, right? So after a country we'll say comma, and we'll say here proxy string, and again type of interface, put a comma here, and that this also means that when we are calling this function from func main, we need to pass the interface. For the purpose of this video I'm not passing any proxy string, so I'll keep it nil. So we'll pass nil here, but you could be using any other proxy, right? And when calling this function scrape client request, you're passing page, but you could also be passing proxy string that will be caught here. All right, and so these are the two things that this function accepts as parameters. These are two things it returns from this function after processing. And now if you want to use this proxy string, then we'll have a function called get scrape client, which will help us to create a scrape client. By mistake there's a capital L here, the L needs to be small, and here's where we'll pass our proxy string, and we'll save this value in a variable called base client. Again, by mistake this L is capital, L needs to be small. So this get scrape client function is what we'll have to work on right now, right? It takes proxy string and it creates a client for us, with the help of which, with the help of this base client, is where we'll make the request to our search URL. All right, so let's work on get scrape client. It takes, as you know, a proxy string which is of type interface as parameter, returns HTTP client. Somehow by mistake every time my L is becoming capital, so it should be small always. And so what we'll do here is we'll switch between proxy strings. So we'll say proxy string dot type, and we'll switch between it. So we'll say take a variable v which switches between all these proxy strings. And there could be two types here, right? One could be string, that you've actually passed a proxy string, so you'll say string, and here you'll say proxy string comma url dot parse v. So parse, that's the proxy string that you've sent, and then we'll return the HTTP client. So I'll write the code in a minute. The other case could be the default case, where we have not passed a string, right? So for example, we just passed nil in our case, so that will be the default case. In the default case, where we're not passing a proxy string, we'll just return the HTTP default client. Again, ls capital by mistake, sorry for that. So here we're going to parse the proxy string, and what we're going to do is, actually, you know what, keep this capital V. And here we'll return a HTTP client for which there will be a transport value http.transport, and it will have a proxy value, and the proxy will be http.proxy URL, and in brackets you'll pass your proxy URL here. So here by mistake I've written proxy string. This should have been proxy URL. So you parse the URL and you get the proxy URL variable, and inside this proxy variable proxy URL you pass proxy URL, right? The proxy string that you get, you pass it here. That becomes the proxy value, and you get the transport value, and then you get the client, HTTP client. So if you have a proxy string, this is the client you return. If you don't have it, this is the client, the default standard client that you return. All right, so we've kept the code quite modular, as you can see. So I've also received requests from people in comments saying that, you know, why don't you keep the code more modular? So that's what I'm trying to do here, and I hope. But the only reason I wasn't doing it is because for beginners it can be difficult to understand the code flowing between so many different functions, right? It becomes difficult to keep a track. So that's why I used to write, you know, just have like 2 or 3 major functions in the code. But now we have a little more functions. Coming back to our escape client request. So here we'll get our escape client from this function, and it'll be stored in base client. So we'll now make a request, right? So we'll use http dot new request package, new request function, and here we're using our HTTP package that we have imported out here already, nest/http package, and this makes a request. The request that we want to make is the get request. We want to make the request to the search URL. Search URLs, just to you know, remind you again, it's coming from our build Bing URLs. You get that whole slice, and then you range over those slices in your Bing script. You're ranging over them, and then one by one those links are being passed here as search URL, and so one by one you're basically making requests to them. And so you'll have to set your header. So we'll say request dot header dot set and user agent. Now to set your user agent, you'll call a function called random user agent that helps you select a random user agent from your list of user agents. Now we have started writing this function here, so let's complete that function. So our random user agent function basically takes random.seed. So random is the package here that we're using, math.random. In that random package we have a function called seed. It takes time.now.unix, and it creates a random number, random.integer percentage length of user agents. So you take the length of user agents and you create a random number from you know, one of those, and then you say return the user agent that's present at that random number, right? So for example, you'll have, let's say, 5 or 6 different user agents, right? So now in this case, you'll start from the first value, and then you'll go up till the length of all the user agents, and then you'll select a random number. Let's say the random number is 2, right? So the value present at the second position, which in this case will be the first. So basically in a slice, it's 0, 1, 2, 3 indexes, right? So if it's the second, if the number is 2, then the third value, basically 0, 1, and 2, the third value will be selected here, and then it will be returned here as a user agent. And not only 3 will be returned, but the third value actually, because from user agents and then you have the random number, which is 3. So you'll be able to access the third value, and that's what will be returned from this random user agent function, right? So what's happening here is that every single time you make a request, you're making a request from a different or from a random user agent. And this ensures that you don't hit any rate limits or anything like that. And there are multiple ways to not hit rate limits or not get blocked by Bing or Google, and that's by one is obviously from using these random user agents, random user agents. Second is to add delays, that we're also doing, right? We're adding a delay also between requests. And the third is to randomize your IP addresses. You can create an IP address pool where you can farm those IP addresses, and then you can use random IP addresses. So I'm not going into that. That's a little more complicated territory, and if there are beginners watching this, then it'll really confuse them. But if you want to see that kind of complex scraping, you can let me know in the comments below, and I'll create a video which will have all of those different elements, right? So we'll do some more professional scraping in that. Now we'll take our base client. So we're back in our scrape client request function. We'll take our base client, and then we'll make a request. So we'll say do, and we'll say request. All right. And after making the request, we'll get either a response or we'll get an error. If the response dot status code not equal to 200. So you must, if you're not from a web development background, there are these different status codes, right? Whenever you make a request, it could be 200, could be 400, 502, or 404. So 200 basically means that everything was okay. So what we are saying here is that when we made this request, if everything is not okay, then there's some issue, right? And most probably the issue would be something to do with the ban. So we'll say scraper received a non 200 status code suggesting a ban, and we'll return nil, error. All right. If an error is there, so we'll say if error not equal to nil, we'll return nil for the response, and we'll return the error. And if everything was all right, everything goes well, then we'll just return response and nil for the error. So this is the best case scenario. Sorry. I'll just Control Z. Yeah. So all good here. So that's with your scrape client request, all right? And so we wrote two functions in this video: get scrape client and scrape client request. And now the whole program is taking shape. In the next program, in the next video, we'll be working on our Bing result scraper, which is this function. And we'll also try and run this code and see if we get any errors, which I'm sure we'll get many errors, and we'll then try and fix all those errors, right? And the parsing function is also going to be slightly long, so that's why I want to keep this for the next video. And again, like I said, in the previous video also I had mentioned that I recommend you going through these videos one day at a time so that you don't get bombarded by too much information if you're new to Golang. So do stay subscribed to this channel. So we have reached quite far with the other 5 videos, and in this video we're going to be working on the Bing result parser, where we take an unstructured response that we're getting from calling the APIs for all those URLs, and we're going to structure it in this case, right? And structure it based on our struct that we have created for search result, and we're going to return that to our Bing script function, which basically appends it into this results variable, and it returns that to func main, where it just prints it out. Simple and straightforward. So this Bing result parser, it takes a couple of things, right? It takes this response and it takes something called as rank. So let's write here response, which is of type pointer dot http dot response, and it takes a rank which is of type int, and it returns a slice of type search result, and it returns an error if there's an error. And before we get into that, I think what I'll do is I'll actually copy and paste the remaining user agents. Like I told you, you'll just have to copy and paste from my GitHub code. I'll leave the link below in one of the comments or in description. So I'll copy and paste it here. And for our Bing domains, I'll copy and paste the Bing domains as well. So here are all our Bing domains, and here are all our user agents. And now we can get back to our Bing result parser. Okay. Now in our Bing result parser, we have so we're going to be using our GoQuery package here. So we'll say GoQuery dot, there's a function called new document from response. So when I was using GoQuery package, I didn't exactly tell you what it does, right? So it basically helps you to take the response that you received after calling a URL and creates a document from that response. And once you create a document from that response, you can then run multiple operations on it, which we'll do shortly. So you send it a response and it gives you a document. So we'll say document comma error. So it can return a document or it can return an error, right? So as you know, with Golang, whenever it returns an error, we have to handle the error. So we'll say if error not equal to nil, which means if error is there, then you will return nil for the search results, and you'll just return the error directly. And here we'll take a variable called results and make it equal to search result, empty for now. And now there are some terms and some IDs and divs and elements that are specific to Bing. So I have already taken the pain of going through the responses that you get from Bing and understanding where do you get those links, where do you get titles, where do you get descriptions, all of those things. So we need these things, right? We need the URL, the title, description, all these things. So they come in particular elements or divs basically inside the inside the results that are sent back to you from Bing. So I've already taken the pain and identifying those. So all you have to do is just follow what I'm doing here on screen, right? Or you can also take a look at the response, as in print out the response to your terminal that you get from Bing, and then you can break it down yourself by printing out this doc. All right. So here we'll take a variable called cell, and we'll say doc.find we need to find something called as li.b underscore algo. All right, and then we'll increment our rank by 1. And now the cell contains a lot of nodes, so we'll have to range over all those nodes. So we'll say range cell.nodes, but here I'll also say for I is equal to, all right, inside cell.nodes we'll have something called as an item cell.eq I, and we'll say link tag. So link tag helps us to get the link tag, and we'll say item. So this is the item, and using that item we can now run item.find. So first we look for a. So as you know, links basically have this a tag, right, with the HTML. So we've converted the HTML response that we got into a document which will have which will create it searchable for us, and we can run all these different operations on it. So we'll say find a, and to get our link, so we need something called as link, as you can see here. So for link we'll say equal to link tag. Inside this link tag, inside this a tag, you will also have href, right? So you'll say dot attribute href, and then you'll say title tag item dot find h2. So the h2 will be the title, and then you need your description tag. For description tag you have dsc tag dot text. To get the description, the value of the description, you will say inside the description tag and for the title tag we'll say title tag dot text. All right, so you got your title, you got your description, which is basically what you wanted, right? Title and description, and URL is the link. So you got all of that there. Now we'll say link is equal to strings dot trim. So let's trim all the spaces out, and now we'll have to process the link a little bit. So we'll say if link not equal to empty and link not equal to a null link, which is hash, and the link does not have a prefix to a different page, which is with slash, then you'll say result equal to search result, and here you'll say your rank, right? So your rank, your URL, title and description, your rank, your link which has the URL, your title which has the title, and description DESC which has description. After that you'll say results is equal to append. Inside this results, which is a slice of type search result, you're going to append the result, and you're going to say rank plus plus. And from this function you return the results and the error. So it's this is quite a function, this is quite a program, as in it has a lot of different details, and we want to try running it. And when we try running it, it's going to give us errors, and I know that for a fact. All right, so let's run it. So let's say go run main.go. So as you can see, you see all these different errors, which is and it says too many errors. That means that even if you solve all of these, there will be many more errors after that, and most of them have to do with brackets and all these assignment operators and I++, all of those different things. So what we'll do is we'll start solving these errors one by one, and then we'll see how many more are there to solve. So if you're a developer, I'm sure you're very, very comfortable with seeing so many errors. But if you're new to development, you'll probably get overwhelmed, and you'd think that you can avoid these errors while coding. And you can do that. You can be like very, very particular. You can be, you can pay a lot of attention to detail. I don't believe in doing that. I believe in just writing out the code that's when I'm in the flow, and I believe in fixing errors later on. Like this, I try running the code and I get a lot of errors, and I try and fix them later on. So let's get started with the errors now. So let's look at the first error here. It says line number 13. Let's go to line number 13. Okay, so here the issue is we have to put a var here because it's a variable, right? So that's why it says non-declaration statements outside the body function, right? Makes sense. Line number 13 fixed. Now let's go to line number 61. Line number 61, it says unexpected new line, expecting comma or bracket. So let's say unexpected new line because we've not put a comma here. Now the thing with Golang is that the errors are so clear that it tells you exactly what it's looking for, right? It's not like JavaScript. JavaScript, you'd spend hours looking for the exact issue if you have experience with Node.js, right? With Golang, everything's so clear. I mean, this is why I'm so confident in writing Golang code without even thinking twice and making all these mistakes, because I know I'll be able to fix them in a minute, because it tells me exactly on which line, exactly what the issue is, on what it's expecting, right? So let's go to line number 80 now. Line number 80. So now it says, oh sorry, I've clicked this by mistake. Now it says on line number 80, cannot use I++ as value. And why could that be? It's because here, instead of comma, I had to put a semicolon. Now, I can easily edit this video and fix all these errors, right? And or from the beginning, I can write the right code because, by checking every single line. But I don't do that because I want to make mistakes. I want to see how, the mistakes that you'll make in the real world when you work on like big production scale applications, and how do you solve them. And with Golang, like I said, it's not an issue at all. So, and you go to line number 80 again, it says unexpected. So this is unexpected, says, but I think, I have a feeling that once we've put this, all of the errors that's showing after line number 80 till line number 81, all of these will go away. That's what I think, But even if they don't go away, not a problem. We'll come back and we'll solve them later. But for now, I'm going to ignore these 80, 81 lines because I know it's because of that semicolon, right? Now you can go to line number 152. So let's go to line number 152. And here it says it's expected new line or comma. So let's put a comma here. Cool. Line number 190. Okay. So with line number 190, 91, 92, 92 again, there are all these different errors. And that's because when we declared our func main, we didn't put these empty brackets. We don't have any parameters, but still we'll have to put those empty brackets to show Golang that's actually a function, right? So again, all of these are really silly mistakes, very, very small, silly mistakes, but you will be making those mistakes, right, in the real world. And when you make them with JavaScript, I mean, if you have experience with JavaScript, you know how long it takes to fix these, but with Golang, it tells you exactly what the issue is. Now let's run the program again. So it gives us some more errors. Now let's try and fix those as well. So here it says on line 87, undefined error. Let's go to line 87. Okay, so this error is undefined, it says. And that's because here we should have said error equal to fmt.error, right? So because this is the build Bing URLs, and yeah, so this won't trouble us anymore. And now let's go to line number 142. Title tag is not defined. 142, it says title tag is not defined. So this is because we don't have an equal to sign here. And now everything should be okay. And after line 142, where it said title tag defined not used, we have fixed that now. The other errors are with 143, 145, and 154. 143, 145, 154. And now it says on these two errors, you can assume that they've been caused by this title tag issue, right? But on 154, it says the first argument append must be slice. Now we know that the first argument results is a slice because we just defined it as a slice here, out here. And it should have struct result rank int URL string and string again, right? So this means that it's not able to find this type of structure, like these different int, struct, string, all these. It's not able to find that properly, and that could be an issue because created from this part where we had the title tag is not equal to, where we had that issue, and because of that maybe this is getting created. And again at the end it says on 154, it said that this result is not defined, right? That this whole result thing is not defined. And so I have a feeling that it's because of those issues, but let me also check again once more. This actually should have been result, right? Yeah, so this should have been result. And then result, at least now, will be defined. And that's what it was also saying, I think. But these issues are again being caused by title tag, and title tag might have also will also cause issues here on this line because it's not defined title, right? You won't be able to extract the title from title tag if title tag was not defined. So we have fixed this issue as well, this issue as well, and now I think everything should work. So let's see if there are any more errors. Yeah, so there are more errors. It says undefined description tag. So I was wrong when I said that this is actually dependent on this. It's not dependent on this. It is it has its own issue. So here I think we'll have to write item dot find because we want the tag, exact tag, right? So we'll say find I is small, and here we'll put the exact element where Bing keeps their descriptions. Now once we run it, things seem to be working, but I don't see anything on the output, and that could also be a problem. That could also be an issue. Let's wait for a while and see what's happening out here. So we've passed that we need 2 pages, 30 results with a delay of 30 seconds. And it's here, it's not, doesn't seem to be working. So we'll have to find another solution to fix it, I think. So what we can do here is we can reduce this to single page. We can reduce this to 15 so that at least what I think is happening is that it's taking too long to parse all those results. That's what I think is happening. And so let's go run main.go again and let's wait for a while and see what happens. Since now there are less pages and less results to be fetched, I'm hoping that it doesn't take the same amount of time. Actually, it's taking too long. Maybe what I can do is I can pause this video and then restart it again so that, oh yeah, sorry, it's here. all the results are here. It takes a while basically to get all this information from Bing. So these are the results that you get if you search Akhil Sharma, right? So there's an author called Akhil Sharma, so most of the results are his. So none of the results are mine here. So these are the results. So you could be searching for anything here, and like I said, it's taking time, but you can try your hand. You can try it, a couple of different results, and you'll get all of that here. So I hope you learned a lot in this video. I mean, I did go line by line. I tried to explain every single function, every single line of code, and why it's written and what's happening exactly. Even if you don't understand anything, you can just put everything in the comments below, right? Whatever doubts you're having, and I'll try and fix them. And do subscribe to this channel so that you come to know when I create other videos. So we have some really interesting series coming out, right? You may have seen those teaser videos for Golang plus React courses and cryptocurrency Golang courses. So do stay subscribed, and thanks a lot for watching.
It's not a game, it's a rich thing.